OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, NVIDIA, and so forth are driving the stock market higher and higher. That's a bubble dynamic on its own. It's being driven by AI. That's not even the application of AI. That's the AI narrative around the stock market. So it's almost as if AI is doing double duty. It's the narrative is creating a stock market bubble, and the reality is priming it for a colossal collapse. So get ready for that. So let me give a very concrete example of that. So the stock market, we saw in March 2020, it fell 30% in 1 month, the quickest crash in history of that magnitude. And what happens in a situation like that? AI produces something called the fallacy of composition. Now, it sounds fancy, but I can explain it in plain English. So I'll give you an example. So you're at a football game, and you don't particularly like your seat, or you can't see as well as you might wish. So you stand up. Well, now you can see fine. You're like, hey, I got a great view. I can see everything. But what happens next? Well, the guy behind you stands up because he wants to see, and the person behind him, she stands up. And next thing you know, the entire stadium's on their feet, and nobody's better off. You're all worse off, actually, because you're standing. So the point is, it's a behavior that benefits an individual in an individual case, but produces adverse detrimental results when taken to a larger scale. That's the fallacy of composition. Now, what does that mean in terms of capital markets? Well, let's say the markets are crashing, and they do, for 100 reasons. We can invent reasons, but it happens all the time. An individual might say, well, I don't know what's going on here. I'm losing a lot of money on paper. I'm going to sell everything, go to cash, go to the sidelines, wait till it's over, and then I'll tiptoe back into the market. That's a perfectly rational approach for an individual. It's, you're trying to, not losing money is as important as making money. So sell early, go to cash, go to the sidelines, tiptoe back in when the coast is clear. That's a smart and individual strategy. But what happens if everybody in the market does the same thing? Well, we know what happens. You have all sellers, no buyers. Markets aren't just crashing, they're going straight down through the
Everyone's
floor.
running for the fire exit.
Correct. And then you've got to, then you get into circuit breakers. They don't work. People queue up to sell as soon as the circuit breaker's over. It keeps going. And at the end of the day, if it's bad enough, the regulators will not just close the markets. So, for 15 minutes, which is what a circuit breaker does, they'll close the markets, indefinitely. And people say, well, that will never happen. Well, it has happened. The New York Stock Exchange was closed from August to December 1914 at the beginning of World War I. It was closed for 4 days. We're trading days after 9/11. So apart from weekends and holidays, those things do happen. So there's an example of a behavior that is good for the individual, but disastrous on a large scale. Now, that's not new. Those kinds of panics have been around forever. What is new is that we've harnessed AI to the individual trader in such a way that will be accelerated and amplified. Because AI doesn't have any common sense. And by the way, intelligence is a misnomer. People say no intelligence. There's no intelligence, no brain behind the curtain. It's math. It's pure math. And it's very, very important to understand that. So now what happens is, we're handing over our decision-making to artificial intelligence. There are actually hedge funds that have launched to say, we're not going to pick, we're going to let the artificial intelligence pick the stocks for us. And by the way, some of them have had some early success. It's often the case that if you're the only one doing it or you're early, you get some benefits. But again, as I described, as more and more people jump in, they'll all be on the same side of the boat and it'll tip over. So what you're doing basically is you're taking human nature, which hasn't changed in the history of civilization, but probably much longer than that, combining it with AI, which mimics it, putting it together and getting into a feedback loop that will amplify and accelerate the dangers I'm describing. That same thing is true in a banking panic. So we've all seen grainy black and white pictures of bank runs in the 1930s where you have mostly men in overcoats and fedoras in the rain lined up around the block trying to get their money out of the bank, which they're not going to do because the insiders already took the money. But we recall that from the Great Depression. This is exactly the same thing, but at much faster speeds, much faster scale. So now, an example would be in a bank run, you just take your iPhone, your Android out and say, move the money here, push, done. And then you text your friend, hey, get out while there's still time. He or she does the same thing, boom, done. But take it further. So actually a lot of people have built-in instructions, built-in stop losses that will do that behind the curtain. You don't even have to do it yourself. It'll just happen because everyone's programmed. But if everyone's doing the same thing, and that's really the point, they're programmed to do what makes sense for an individual, but it's disastrous at scale. And I have a couple different characters. One guy is a family office manager. Another couple of guys are market manipulators. They're criminals, but they know AI. They know how to do deep fakes and so forth. You have a central bankers on a plane. They can't get to them on time. Reporters, et cetera. And then, Chinese intelligence are trying to disrupt the market. They're not even trying to make money. They're trying to destroy the markets. And the point I make is that there's no mastermind. It's not as if the Chinese cyber warriors are in touch with the market manipulators. It's not as if the market manipulators are in touch with the portfolio manager. It is the case that they're all acting individually, using AI, using deepfakes, et cetera. And when you combine all these things, it is a very, very volatile and toxic mix. And this could happen very quickly. Well, you can go back 10 or 15 years, and we all lived through that. But I can go back at this point 26 years to 1998. I was the general counsel of long-term capital management, and I witnessed that meltdown from the inside, and I negotiated the bailout. And what people don't know is okay, it was $4 billion, all cash, 72 hours, no due diligence, get it done. And there were, it was an army of lawyers. I was the lead lawyer on one side of the deal, but there were hundreds of lawyers involved. But my point being, we got the money in, and foamed the runways, and the engines are on fire, but we didn't crash the plane, but we came this close. People, that people don't realize we were just hours away from shutting every market in the world. So I was a front row seat, firsthand witness. That was before AI, and that's really my point. Take those dangers, which are real, and you point to 2008, and that was real, and now combine it with the accelerant and the amplification of AI in the way we just talked about, and you see it's even more dangerous. Meanwhile, what's going on in the stock market? OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, NVIDIA, and so forth are driving the stock market higher and higher. That's a bubble dynamic on its own. It's being driven by AI. That's not even the application of AI. That's the AI narrative around the stock market. So it's almost as if AI is doing double duty. The narrative is creating a stock market bubble, and the reality is priming it for a colossal collapse. So get ready for that. And I talk to in the book, I explain to readers, kind of what they can do to help themselves. I also I never do scenarios like that without offering some solutions. I think that's, you almost have it. You can't just, I don't try to scare people. I try to warn people, but I also have some solutions. One of the solutions is a branch of science called cybernetics. And cybernetics comes from a Greek word. In its origins means the helmsman, like who's steering the boat. You're the helmsman. This goes back to the Odyssey. And I'll give you again a concrete example. So let's say you're driving on ice. I live in the mountains, so I end up on ice every now and then. Well, if you slam on the brakes, the car's not going to stop. It's going to keep going, or it's going to spin or go out of control or go off the road. What you do in a difficult situation is you tap the brakes. Tap, 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 tap. Keep two hands on the wheel, stay focused, and hopefully the car will come to a safe stop. Well, let's apply that to markets. Right now, the circuit breakers, and they came out of the 1987 crash, and the stock market fell 20% in one day, not in a month or in a year, in one day. But they set the circuit breakers. So the market goes down a certain amount. They close the markets for 15 minutes. Supposedly it gives people time to talk to each other. Hey, what do we do here, et cetera. Reopen. But if you hit the next circuit breaker, there's another 15-minute closure. And on the third circuit breaker, you shut the markets. So that's the equivalent of slamming on the brakes. But what about a system that works as follows? You're starting to go down. You're approaching what, at least today, is a circuit breaker. And you say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throttle the sell orders. We're not going to close the markets. But if you put in massive sell orders, which in a panic everyone's doing, we're only going to execute 30% of them, not 100%. Give the buyers a little time to catch up. And then if it gets worse, all right, we're going to throttle it down some more. We're only going to let 10% of the sell orders, be matched with buy orders, et cetera. In other words, you're tapping the brakes instead of slamming the brakes. That's the kind of thing that could give the buyers, a chance to circle back. And, in the old days, when we go back to the 70s, 80s, even as late as the 90s, the New York Stock Exchange had a position, similar to other markets, called the specialist. The specialist was given a privilege, but they had a duty. The privilege was you were the exclusive market maker in a certain stock, and you got to see the back of the book. You saw what was, not just the best bid offer, but everything behind it. The duty was you were supposed to stand up to the market, meaning if there was a wave of sellers, you would be a buyer to kind of equilibrate things. Or if there was a frenzy of buying, you would be a seller to kind of, that's tapping the brakes. That system is long gone. A good friend of mine was director of floor operations at the New York Stock Exchange. He's down on the floor. And I was down there with him one day, and he said, Jim, don't think for a minute there's any liquidity on this floor. There isn't. We make a living, we do our jobs, but there's nothing here that's going to stop a panic from getting out of control. So again, cybernetics, using computing power to mitigate the effect of other computing power is a way to hopefully resolve some of these situations.